Now, for this tutorial, I actually set up a virtual machine so that I can freshly install all of the applications that we need to install today. So hopefully you'll be able to follow this tutorial exactly to a T and won't have to worry about anything being possibly different or running into any issues like that. Now, just to keep in mind, this virtual machine is running Windows 11. If you're on Windows 10 or maybe even an older version, you should still be fine with following along. And if you're on Mac, well, I don't know what to tell you. At this point, you've probably gotten used to following Windows tutorials, so I don't think you'll have much trouble following this one. Anyways, I already installed Roblox Studio on this virtual machine, so if you haven't already installed Roblox Studio, you certainly need to do that. And also, there's going to be a link down below in the description to all of these different things that we need to install. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Chrome. And now, the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and install Visual Studio Code. So we'll click the download for Windows button, and eventually we should see the download start, and once it's finished, we can go ahead and open up the program. Now, this will take us through the installation process, so we'll hit agree, then we'll install it to the default location, and we're pretty much just going to click next through everything. I'm going to go ahead and create a desktop icon, then I'll click next, and then we'll click the install button. And now we just have to give it a little bit of time to actually install this program. Once it's finished installing, it should give us this prompt right here that says launch Visual Studio Code, and we can go ahead and click the finish button, and it should automatically start up Visual Studio Code. And after a short period of time, my Visual Studio Code has actually loaded up, and this is just what the program actually looks like. If you want to go through getting started with Visual Studio Code, it will help you and allow you to customize your experience. I'm just going to skip over all of these things for now, but I would recommend that if you have not worked with Visual Studio Code before, you come back to this page eventually and you actually go through all of these different steps so that you can make it more towards your liking and see how it all works and everything else like that. Anyways, now that we have Visual Studio Code installed, let's go ahead and install the Rojo extension. Similar to Roblox Studio's plugins, Visual Studio Code has extensions, and if you're unfamiliar with plugins or extensions, you can kind of think of these as mods for video games, but rather than being mods for games, they're actually incredibly useful tools that we can use for making our development experience easier. Now, on the left-hand side of Visual Studio Code, you should see a couple of symbols here, and we want to click the extensions icon, which is actually 4 squares with one broken off. Once we click that, it'll pretty much open up Visual Studio Code's extension marketplace where we can search for different extensions. And the one that we want to search for is going to be called Rojo. And the extension that we're looking for is this one right here. If we click on this, we should be able to see the extension page. You should see that the author of this is Eva, and this is the verified domain, so that's how you can verify that you're actually installing the correct one. Then we can click the install button, and it'll go ahead and install Rojo for us. Now, the next thing that I want to do is install the Rojo plugin inside of Roblox Studio so that we can connect Visual Studio Code with Roblox Studio. Now, it's actually incredibly easy to install the Rojo Roblox Studio plugin, and since we've installed the extension inside of Visual Studio Code, we can actually use that extension to automatically install the Roblox Studio plugin for us as well. Now, the first thing that we actually have to do, though, is open a folder, and this folder is actually what we'll use to store our project. So we're going to click on Open Folder. Then I guess I'll go to My Documents. I'll go ahead and create a brand new folder, and I'm going to name this Roblox Game Project. The name of the folder doesn't actually matter, so you don't have to worry about that. As we're opening this folder, you might see a warning here asking if you trust the authors or not. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I've never clicked no, I don't trust the authors. But of course, if you're working on some project that you're not familiar with, then I would advise you to maybe do that. For this project though, that's not something that you have to worry about, so we can go ahead and click yes, I trust the authors. Now that we've opened up a folder inside of Visual Studio Code, we can actually use the Rojo plugin. Now, to use Rojo, we actually need to use Visual Studio Code's command palette. To use the command palette, we can go up towards the top left of the screen and click on the View button, and then we want to select the command palette. We can also see the shortcut here is Control, Shift, and P. So you can also input that keyboard shortcut and it'll open this up directly for you. Now, of course, inside of the command palette, we can see a bunch of different commands that we can actually run, and we are most interested in the Rojo one. So we can either hit Enter or select Rojo Open Menu. And once we do that, we can see another menu is open for us. And what we want to click is Install Rojo Now. If you click the Need Help button, it'll obviously take you to their Discord server, which I would encourage you to join if you do need help. But we want to click the Install Rojo Now button, and what this will do is it'll effectively download Rojo for this specific folder. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. Then we should eventually see a pop-up that says successfully installed Afmin on your system, and it should say successfully installed Rojo with Afmin as well. Afmin is a toolchain manager, which quite frankly, I don't know a ton about, but the way that I think of Afmin is it's basically a tool that's used by other tools like Rojo to install other tools as well. If that's confusing for you at all, I'll leave a link down below in the description to the Afmin repository, which covers it a little bit more, but either way, it's not something that I would really worry about too much. Anyways, you should see a drop-down menu right here, which says that this workspace contains no project files, and it gives us the option to create one now. Additionally, you should see an afman.toml file created inside of your project. Additionally, if you don't see that drop-down menu, you should be able to look towards the bottom right of your Visual Studio Code, and you should see a Rojo icon down here. When you click the Rojo icon, that menu should pop back up, But if you're unable to see the Rojo icon down here, we can go back to view, go back to the command palette, and then click on Rojo open menu like we did previously. Anyways, now that we have this drop-down menu open again, we're going to go ahead and click create one now. And now we can see a bunch of files have been created, as well as a folder called SRC. And what this effectively did was set up a default Rojo project, which basically gets us started and allows us to have a project to sync with Roblox Studio. Now, we'll go over all the stuff that's in this project in 1 second, but the last thing that we want to do is actually install the Roblox Studio plugin. Again, if you don't have that menu popped up, you can click the Rojo button at the bottom right, or you can use the command palette. But then you want to click on Install Roblox Studio Plugin, and once you do that, it should display Roblox Studio Plugin has been installed. If you're not seeing these messages or they're disappearing too quickly, you can actually click the notification button, which is a bell at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and you should see all of your notifications here. Now that we've installed the Rojo plugin inside of Roblox Studio, we're going to go ahead and open up Roblox Studio. If you had Roblox Studio already open when you installed the plugin, you most likely have to restart your Studio to be able to actually see the plugin. Now that we have Studio open, I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new base plate. And now we're going to want to go to the Plugins tab. Once we're on the Plugins tab, we should see the Rojo logo right here. And when we click it, we should see a little window appears. Now, if you don't see the Rojo plugin here, you might have to just restart your Roblox Studio. But if that's still not working, I have a link down below in the description, which will link you directly to the Rojo plugin page. And alternatively, you might be lucky enough to find it inside of the toolbox if you search under plugins for Rojo. And now this is the correct plugin right here to install. It should be by the Rojo Foundation, or you might see it say by Boat Bomber. Those would be the correct plugins to install, but I would recommend using the other two methods that I suggested rather than going through the toolbox where things could possibly get tricky. Anyways, now that we have the plugin inside of Roblox Studio and we have the extension inside of Visual Studio Code, we can actually sync our Visual Studio Code up with Roblox Studio. Before we do that though, we should actually talk a little bit about what a Rojo project consists of. So, Rojo generated its default project for us to use. That includes a README file. Now, this README file gives us a little bit of information to help us out, but if you don't care about that, you can go ahead and delete that. The next thing we have is the default.project.json file. And now this file is essentially used by Rojo to figure out how a project is actually set up. Now, if you make any modifications here and you experience some errors, what I would recommend you do is honestly copy everything inside of here, send it to ChatGPT or Google's AI or anything like that, and ask them to fix it. I've made some mistakes in JSON before, and I've had great experiences with using AIs to easily fix my mistakes. Now, the first property inside of here is called name, which doesn't exactly matter. It's just kind of a string. It's just kind of some text that you'll see displayed when you use the Rojo plugin inside of Studio. Usually when I create a project, I'll copy my template and paste it from an old one, and then I usually just keep the name the same. I don't ever care about the name for the most part, but you can change it if you feel like it. After that, we have the tree property, which is a table. Then we have a property called class name, which is set to a string called data model. And effectively what the tree is you could actually think of this as similar to Roblox Studio's Explorer. And essentially, the Explorer is the data model. And inside of the Explorer/data model, it has the replicated storage, the server script service, the starter player, the workspace, the lighting service, the sound service, and a bunch of other things as well. If we actually look inside of the Explorer, we can see all of those things that are actually listed inside of this file. Now, obviously, some services are missing from this file that are only inside of the Explorer, but that's just because we haven't added them to this file. I think the easiest would be to look at the workspace, for example. If you look at the workspace, we can see that it is a table. And inside of the table, it has a property called properties. And that is another table which actually contains specific properties of the workspace that we can customize. So we can actually see that our Rojo project sets the filtering enabled property of the workspace to true. If we look at the workspace inside of our Explorer and look for the filtering enabled property, well, actually the filtering enabled property is kind of a terrible example to use here. I guess technically Rojo's default project is severely outdated. This property doesn't actually exist any longer on the workspace service, but we can look at any other modifiable property inside of the workspace. Now, let me just make this a little bit larger so we can actually read some of these. I'm actually going to close the Rojo window and then expand this a little bit. So let's say that we wanted to modify the streaming enabled property. We would type the exact name of the property here, so streaming enabled, and then we could set it to false rather than the default value of true. So that's what this little section is right here. We're able to modify properties of services inside of our Explorer. Now, after the properties table, we can also see another properties attached to the workspace, which is actually called baseplate. And inside of the baseplate table, we actually use the class name property to indicate what type of instance this actually would be. So we're effectively adding a part directly inside of the workspace, which we're calling baseplate. And then we're modifying its properties. Now, a lot of these things are complex and you probably aren't going to be doing these things the first day, but I wanted to show that to you because I think taking a look at workspace is the simplest thing that we can look at inside of this file to make us understand it. Anyways, we've actually made a change. So we said that we wanted to set the streaming enabled property to false. Let's go ahead and save this and then begin syncing this project with Roblox Studio so we can actually see those changes made right in front of us. So to start up a Rojo project, what we can do is we can either use the command palette and open up the Rojo menu and then start the default.project.json file from right here, or we can click this little button down here, which is what I do most of the time, to pop up the Rojo menu and then start it the exact same way. Now we should see that Rojo server listening and then the actual address that it's listening to. And now that we've done that, we'll go inside of Roblox Studio, open up the Rojo plugin, and then click on Connect. Then it'll give us the option to confirm that we do actually want to sync Visual Studio Code to Roblox Studio. And effectively inside of red, what it's saying here is these are the things that we've made changes to. Then the green lines are brand new things that are being added to here. And if you're doing this inside of an already existing Roblox project, you might even see some things which will be deleted because you're syncing Roblox Studio with Visual Studio Code. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and click on Accept. And once we click on Accept, we can see that we have been connected to the session. And now if we take a look at the properties on the workspace, we can see that streaming enabled has now actually been set to false. Now, just to show you, I can go ahead and change the streaming enabled property back to true, and we can see that instantly synced inside of Roblox Studio. So now the property has been enabled to true. Okay, now we're going to take a look at how the scripting side of things is actually set up inside of this project. Inside of the tree, we can see that we're using the replicated storage, the server script service, and the starter player. And now what we're doing with each of these services inside of here is we're actually linking folders that are inside of our Visual Studio Code project, and we're pointing Rojo to where we want to store those things at inside of our actual game. So we can see that we have a source folder right here. We're going to go ahead and expand that. And now inside of here, we can see that we have 3 different folders: client, server, and shared. So if we look at the replicated storage inside of here, we can see that inside of this object, we have an object called shared. And inside of that object, we set the path property of it to a string, which is source/shared. So what the path is right here is actually the file path to the specific folder that we want to sync up to the specific location, which is the replicated storage. So inside of our source folder, we have the shared folder, and every single thing that's inside of this folder is going to be synced up and put inside of Roblox Studio's replicated storage. Now, to be more specific though, it's not just going to be put inside of the replicated storage, because the way we have this set up is we actually added another object to the replicated storage, which is called shared. And now by default, if we don't specify a class name, for example, or we're not already using an existing service, then what the object will default to is a folder. So inside of the replicated storage, we're creating a folder called shared, and inside of that folder is going to be all of the contents of our actual shared folder inside of our source folder. And if that's confusing to you at all, don't worry. We can actually look inside of Roblox Studio, take a look inside of the replicated storage. When we look inside of the replicated storage, we can see that we have a folder called shared. Then inside of the shared folder, we can see that we actually have a module script called hello. Now, what if we wanted to put our scripts directly inside of the replicated storage rather than putting them inside of the shared folder? Well, all we have to do is remove the shared object from the replicated storage and just include the specific path. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and save our project. And if we look back at Roblox Studio, we should now see that our hello module script is now inside of the replicated storage, and there no longer is a shared folder. So hopefully this explanation makes it easier to understand how the project files are actually set up. Now, things get a little confusing if we take a look at the server script service. From just looking at the project file, you would think that inside of the server script service, there would be a folder called server, and inside of that folder would be all of the things that we have inside of our server folder inside of our project. The thing is though, is that since we have a file inside of our server folder with the name init, I-N-I-T, when we name a file that actually modifies what its parent directory becomes. Now, that's probably pretty confusing, and it's not something that I feel like is even worth explaining here. So what we're going to do is actually just rename this file to be called hello.server.lua. And now that we've done that, we should be able to take a look at Roblox Studio. And now if we look inside of the server script service, we see the server folder, and inside of there, we actually see our server script, which is called hello. So now the project file should make a little bit more sense to you. But with that being said, I want all of the contents of our server folder to be put directly inside of the server script service. So I'm going to go ahead and modify this as well. And now when we save that and look inside of Studio, we should be able to see that the server folder from the server script service has been removed. The last thing that we have to cover is the starter player/starter player scripts. Inside of here, we have a local script called client. And if we take a look at how our project file is actually set up, we can see that this should actually be a folder. But if we look inside of our client folder, we can see that the only script that we have inside of here is called init, so it's actually changing the folder to be a script. So we'll go ahead and rename this to be called hello as well. And then when we look inside of Roblox Studio, we now see the client folder is appearing. But again, we just want to put the scripts directly inside of the starter player scripts. So let's go ahead and remove that folder. And now we should have them appearing directly inside of their service. Okay, now we're done with covering the project file. If you want to learn more about project files, I would definitely recommend you check out the documentation on the Rojo website. But the next thing that I want to actually talk about is how scripts are set up inside of here. Now, this is a pretty straightforward thing. If you want to make a module script, you can name that file, and then the extension that you want to set for the file is .lua or .luau. So we can say hello.luau, or we can create a new file and we'll say hello2.lua. It doesn't matter which one you use, both are completely fine, but those will make module scripts. Now, to make a server script, you actually prefix .lua with .server. So we have hello.server.lua here to create a server script, and we can also say hello2.server.lua to create a server script as well. And then for local scripts, we just have to say .client.lua. So we can say hello2.client.lua. And now, if we look inside of Roblox Studio, we should see that we have all of these scripts as well. So we've got 2 module scripts, we've got 2 server scripts, and we've got 2 local scripts. So that's how you actually create scripts inside of here. But now, before we get any further, the next thing that I want to show you is another really useful Roblox Studio plugin in Visual Studio Code Extension, which is extremely useful while scripting because it basically relays information about our project inside of Roblox Studio automatically to Visual Studio Code. You might think that this is something that Rojo should actually handle, but it does actually make sense that these are 2 completely separate plugins/extensions. Anyways, we're going to go to the Extensions tab, and then we want to search for Roblox LSP, and you want to look for the extension made by Night Trains. We can then go ahead and click on the install button. And now, once you have it installed, you might need to give it some permissions, which we'll go ahead and allow. The reason that it needs some network permissions, I believe, is because it does need a hook into Roblox Studio using your network sort of a thing. I'm also going to apply settings as well, and then we may also need to restart Visual Studio Code as well. So let's go ahead and close this, and then we'll go ahead and reopen it. Now, when we do close Visual Studio Code, it will disconnect us inside of Roblox Studio. So once we open up Visual Studio Code again, we should see Rojo appear here again. And we can actually click these arrow buttons this time because it'll start up our most recent project file. Now, if for some reason it doesn't and it tells you to install Rojo again, then click it. And then you should be able to start up your last project. So now that we've started that up, we'll go ahead and sync it again in Studio. And there we go, we're now synced up. Now that we've installed that LSP extension inside of Visual Studio Code, we can actually open up .luau files, and we can use them and modify them like ordinary Lua files, or like you would any script inside of Roblox Studio. Now, this extension does a ton of things. Like for instance, it's really convenient for automatically importing services that we haven't already added to our script. So let's say that I wanted to do something with the player service, right? And I don't already have a variable for the player service, but let's say I'm going to create a variable called player, and I'm going to use the player service. As we're typing out players, we can actually see the service suggested to us. So we can hit enter to get the service, and we can see that that variable has been automatically created towards the top for us. Along with that, it provides us all auto-completion and everything else like that for using functions, services, and everything else like that. Basically, this allows you to script like you ordinarily would in Roblox Studio, but it's also 10,000 times more convenient and has a lot of better features. Now, to make this even better though, we also need to get the plugin version of this inside of Roblox Studio as well. And the reason for that is because once we do that, it'll then be able to relay all of the information of anything that we have stored inside of Roblox Studio to us over in Visual Studio Code. Now, to explain exactly what I mean, we're going to go ahead and add a part to our workspace. And now we're going to try to access this part inside of our script inside of Visual Studio Code. So we'll go ahead and create a variable called part. And to get the part, we want to go inside of the workspace. And inside of the workspace, we should be able to index this with the word part. The thing is, though, is that we can see all of these different auto-completions are suggested to us. Ignore this one with the ABC symbol here. This is just Visual Studio Code suggesting a word that it thinks we want to spell. But we can see a couple of other suggestions here, like the parent property, the primary part property, the fallen parts, destroy height, and allow third-party sales properties. And then persistent loaded is actually an event. So we see all of those suggestions, but we don't see a part suggestion. And that's actually why we need to install the LSP plugin inside of Roblox Studio. Now, I'll leave a link down below in the description to this plugin as well, but you may also be able to search inside of the toolbox for the LSP plugin, and you should see this one right here. And make sure that it is made by Night Trains, and then you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that you do install this. Now, like I said before, once you install a plugin, you may need to restart your Roblox Studio if you don't see it here. but you should be able to see it here. And if you do see Roblox LSP, you can go ahead and click on the connect button. And once you've done that, you should be able to go to Visual Studio Code and see a notification that says Roblox LSP connected to Roblox Studio plugin. So now the Roblox Studio plugin is relaying a bunch of different information about our entire project back to Visual Studio Code. So now if we actually try to access the part from inside of the workspace, we actually get it automatically suggested to us. And if we hover over our part variable, we can see the type of it as well, and that's all because the LSP plugin is filling in all of that knowledge to us directly from Roblox Studio into our Visual Studio Code. Now, that's only covering one of the many amazing features that Roblox LSP provides. I mean, it is actually insane how much of a difference Roblox LSP and Rojo will make to your development workflow. It is amazing. With that being said, another thing that I want to show you is how to prevent things that you only have stored inside of Roblox Studio from being deleted or overwritten by Rojo. So, a common thing that I find myself doing is storing things inside of the replicated storage. Sometimes I might have a folder inside of here called sounds, and then I'll store all of my sound objects inside of there. But of course, I want to have my scripts inside of the replicated storage as well, so I have it synced up to Rojo, but I don't have my sounds inside of Rojo. So what I'm going to do is disconnect from Rojo, and now we'll reconnect. And once we reconnect to Rojo, we can actually see that our sounds folder has been deleted from the replicated storage. Now, there's a couple of different ways that we can prevent that from happening, and I'm going to show you the simplest one first. We want to go inside of our shared folder, and we want to create a brand new file inside of here. We want to call this init, I-N-I-T, .meta.json. When you do that, an error might pop up, and that's because a blank JSON file might break Rojo, so we might have to restart serving our project, but we don't have to worry about that right this second. Inside of here, we want to create two curly braces. Then we want to create a string, which is ignore unknown instances. And make sure you're spelling all of this 100% correctly. Then we're going to use colons, and then we'll say true. Now, what this file does is it effectively says ignore all of the things that we don't know about inside of the shared service. So the replicated storage, for example, here. Ignore everything that we don't know about and do not override them. So because we have the shared folder hooked up to the replicated storage, now we can add a folder inside of here and then disconnect from our project and then restart this up. And now when we connect to Rojo, we can see that the folder still remains inside of the replicated storage. So that's one method of how you can prevent things from being deleted inside of your different services where you're also storing scripts or different things like that inside of. But there's also another way as well. So let's say that we have a folder inside of here and we're going to call that sounds. And I'm just going to add a sound object in here to kind of make it a little bit less empty. Anyway, we're going to have this folder selected inside of the Explorer. We're going to right click on this and hit save to file. And now we want to actually save this inside of the shared folder inside of our project. I think the easiest way to get the directory is by right clicking inside of the Explorer, inside of Visual Studio Code, hit reveal in File Explorer. That will open up the File Explorer, which should take you to right here, the project directory. We can go inside of the folder, find wherever we want to go, which is inside of the shared folder. We'll copy the directory from here, open up Roblox Studio again, paste the directory up here, and now we're inside of the folder to save it. Now, we need to specify a name for this. I'm just going to go ahead and use the folder's name and say sounds. Then we want to change the save as type from RBXM to RBXMX. You can use an RBXM file, but Rojo prefers the RBXMX files, and they are a little bit easier to work with. So once we change the save type, we can go ahead and hit save. And now if we look inside of Visual Studio Code, we can actually see the RBXMX file has appeared here. If you open this up, you can actually read and probably understand some things that are going on inside of here. I definitely would not recommend changing any of the properties or messing with anything inside of here because you could mess it up and completely break it. Anyways, let's go ahead and test if this will now be deleted from Rojo. We can actually see if we look inside of Rojo, there's a few folders inside of here. Let's first go ahead and disconnect, then we'll delete all of these sound folders. So now we only have the two module scripts inside of here. Then we'll go ahead and hit connect, and we can see that once we connect to it, the folder has been added inside of here with the sound. So yeah, there's two methods of actually handling this. If you want to stop deleting everything that's inside of that service, then you can use the file. But if you just have a couple of things and you don't plan on adding more, then I would also recommend just saving those instances to a file and then putting that directly inside of here and syncing it up like this. Now I'm actually going to return to the project file and we're going to do two things. So when I first started using Rojo, I was really having a hard time wrapping my head around only storing things inside of the replicated storage, server script service, and starter player scripts. I felt like I would store my things kind of all over the place. Sometimes I would even put scripts inside of the workspace, and I would have just different scenarios like that. I was not used to writing my games this way. The thing is that you will eventually learn this method of writing scripts. It's a very common method, and I would say it's probably one of the best ways to structure your scripts. It's just you might not be used to it yet. And don't feel bad. One way to possibly make this a little bit easier is what if we rename the folder to the actual service that it's stored inside of? So we're going to go ahead and update the path and point this at a folder called replicated storage. then what we're going to do is rename the shared folder to replicated storage. We can then do the same thing for the server folder, so we can rename this to server script service. We'll rename the folder as well, and then we can rename starter player scripts as well. And there we go. We've now renamed all the folders. Now again, I would recommend getting used to actually using the other way, but I did want to show you this just in case you were struggling with the other way, and this helps you with an easier transition. Now, another thing that I'll show you is what if we wanted to create a folder for storing things inside of, say, the server storage. We can add another object to this tree. We'll go ahead and say server storage, then we'll use a colon and create a table. Then inside of here, we want to specify the path, which will be our folder. Now, we haven't created that folder yet, but we'll go ahead and create that in just a second. It's going to be inside of the source folder. Actually, I'm not even going to put it inside of the source folder for right now. We'll just store it in our root directory, which is not something that I would ever recommend, but I'm just trying to show you that this is how you could do that. And we'll go ahead and call this folder server storage. Now, after the server storage table, we do need to add a comma for the rest of the things to be added to here as well. Then we can go ahead and save that file. And then inside of here, we'll go ahead and create a folder called server storage. Now we can see that that is created outside of our source folder, because remember how we have the path set up. And then let's go ahead and just create a test.lua script inside of the server storage. Now, when you actually make changes to the project file, what you may need to do is actually stop serving the project inside of Visual Studio Code, which should disconnect your Roblox Studio. If it doesn't get disconnected, make sure you hit disconnect though. And because of all the changes that we were making, I'm going to go ahead and delete everything inside of the replicated storage because I know it'll just be added back. Then we'll go back to Visual Studio Code, start serving the project once again, go back to Studio, connect to it. And then once we connect to it, we can see everything's been added back to the replicated storage. And if we look inside of the server storage, then we can see that there's also a test module script inside of here as well. So that's working perfectly. Now again, though, I would never store anything inside of the root directory. We want to put that inside of the source folder. We'll go ahead and hit move. And now we need to update our projects file once again. And our server storage folder is located inside of our source folder. So we can go ahead and save that, and now it's all good to go. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be it for this episode. As always, if you did enjoy, make sure you smash the like button. Please leave a comment down below, letting other people know that it did work. I and they really do appreciate it. It helps everyone out. And as usual, if you want to gain access to all the scripts and the game file that we made during this episode, as well as a ton of other assets, you can visit monster.dev or my Patreon, link down below in the description to both of these. You can gain access to a ton of assets to easily create your next Roblox game, as well as support me in creating all the content that I create. Anyways, with all that being said, I hope that you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.